From her earliest memories, life had been an endless struggle. Though nature had blessed her with striking beauty that drew eyes wherever she went, poverty had stripped her of the comforts most took for granted. She often wondered why fate had given her a gift that seemed more like a burden than a blessing. Every time strangers praised her face, she could not help but think of the hunger gnawing inside her home, the cracked walls of their small house, and the constant worry about how to afford even a simple meal. Her family had been fragile for years, bound together only by the strength of her mother's presence. But when her mother passed away, the fragile thread snapped. Her elder brother chose to walk away, abandoning them to chase his own path. One sister was already married, and another had fled the house under the weight of despair. What remained was a broken household, her ailing father, whose illness grew heavier with each passing day, her younger brother, full of dreams about studying and building a better life, and herself, caught in the middle between responsibility and survival. She knew she could not let her father suffer or allow her younger brother's dreams to be crushed. Yet she felt trapped. No matter how much courage she carried inside, poverty was merciless. She needed a path forward. That path came one day when a woman from the neighborhood approached her with an offer. The woman explained that her husband arranged visas for women to work in Dubai in the homes of wealthy Arab families. There, she promised, fortunes could be made. At first, suspicion clouded her mind. Why would this woman suddenly offer her such an opportunity? Why was she so eager to help, only asking that the money be repaid within a year? It felt too generous, too calculated. Part of her wanted to refuse outright, yet when she looked at her father's frail figure and thought of her younger brother's hopeful eyes, the weight of responsibility pressed against her chest. She agreed, not out of excitement, but out of duty. If she had to endure hardship for the sake of her family, she would. The thought of sending money home, of paying for her brother's education, of perhaps even giving her father some peace in his final years, these became her guiding lights. And so, with little more than faith in her heart and a suitcase of modest belongings, she prepared to step into a new world. She could not have known then that her journey would carry her into the depths of betrayal, danger, and an unexpected fight for dignity. When she stepped into Dubai, it felt like stepping onto another planet. The scorching desert sun reflected off glass towers that rose like monuments to wealth, while sleek cars glided across flawless roads. She had heard stories of riches, of palaces, of a lifestyle unimaginable to those who came from poverty, but seeing it with her own eyes left her overwhelmed. The city sparkled with both promise and intimidation. Her destination was a mansion so vast it resembled a palace more than a home. The gates opened to reveal gardens trimmed with precision, fountains dancing in the heat, and a garage that looked more like a showroom. Inside stood nearly a dozen luxury cars, each one a gleaming beast of steel and elegance, worth more than she could have ever imagined earning in her lifetime. Her heart trembled. This is where I will live? This is where I must work? When she entered the grand halls of the mansion, the air itself felt heavy with power. Marble floors reflected the chandeliers above, and every corner carried the scent of wealth. The lady of the house appeared suddenly, stopping in her tracks when she saw the newcomer. Her eyes moved slowly from head to toe, and though her face was beautiful and refined, her gaze carried a sharpness that unsettled the young woman. She spoke in Arabic, words quick and almost harsh, leaving the newcomer frozen in confusion. Fortunately, another girl stepped forward, an interpreter employed by the household. In halting Urdu, she explained the expectations. You are to work hard, follow instructions without question, and you must learn Arabic within 2 months. The demand felt impossible. 2 months to master a language that twisted differently on the tongue? She wanted to protest, to explain her limits, but the translator's expression warned her that resistance would cost her dearly. She nodded quietly. It was not long before she began to notice how her presence stirred attention. Her beauty, which she had always considered more a curse than a gift, became the unspoken subject in the household. The staff glanced at her curiously, whispering behind her back. She felt their eyes on her wherever she went, and though she tried to bury herself in her duties, cleaning, cooking, serving, it was impossible to hide. Her existence in that mansion was not invisible. As the days passed, she realized that her new life was not simply about earning a wage. The house was a stage, the people inside it players, and she, unwillingly, had already been drawn into a drama she did not understand. And in the shadows of the palace, Danger waited for the moment to step into the light. It was during one of her routine chores that everything changed. She had begun to adjust to the rhythm of the household, waking early, scrubbing, polishing, and moving silently from room to room like a shadow. The lady of the house remained distant, her sharp gaze a constant reminder that one wrong step could cost her the job. She had tried to convince herself that if she simply worked hard and stayed unnoticed, her months here would pass without incident. But fate had other plans. That afternoon, she was cleaning the vast living room, carefully dusting the edges of a large glass table. The light from the chandeliers shimmered across the floor, and she hummed quietly under her breath to keep herself steady. Then she felt it, the weight of a gaze. Slowly, she lifted her head, and there he was. The master of the house had returned after weeks away. He stood at the doorway, tall and imposing, his presence filling the room. His features carried the authority of a man accustomed to power. Broad shoulders, sharp jawline, eyes that lingered too long. At first, she thought he was simply surprised to see someone new. But then came the smile, slow, knowing, and unmistakably deliberate. Her stomach tightened. She lowered her head quickly, pretending to busy herself with the cloth in her hand. Moments later, she heard the sound of paper sliding across the table. When she looked up, she saw a folded bill resting before her. Her breath caught when she recognized the number, 500 dirhams. For her family back in Pakistan, this amount could cover weeks of expenses. For him, it was nothing more than a careless gesture. Their eyes met briefly. His gaze was not that of an employer watching a servant. It carried something else: interest, curiosity, perhaps even desire. She froze, unsure how to respond, before slowly reaching for the bill and folding it tightly into her palm. Then, in broken Urdu, he asked softly, "What is your name?" "How long have you worked here?" Her voice trembled as she replied, "My name is Samina. I have been here for 1 month." He repeated her name, almost tasting it. "Samina." The way he said it made her skin prickle. There was a warmth in his tone that unsettled her, something far more intimate than an employer's inquiry. Before she could react further, the sharp voice of his wife rang out from the corridor. In an instant, he gestured for her to leave quickly. She obeyed, slipping out of the room, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. As she glanced back once, she saw him greet his wife with practiced affection, his arm slipping easily around her shoulders. Inside her small room later that night, she stared at the folded note of money in her hand. Was it kindness? Was it temptation? She did not know. All she knew was that danger had knocked on the door of her fragile world, and she had no idea how to keep it shut. The following day, she tried to shake off the memory of his gaze and the money left on the table. She told herself it meant nothing, that if she kept her head down and focused on her duties, she could avoid further trouble. Yet the thought refused to leave her mind. Why had he spoken her name with such warmth? Why had he given her money so casually? It unsettled her like a shadow she could not escape. That morning, she worked in the kitchen, her hands busy chopping fruit for juice. The translator had stepped out, and the house was unusually quiet. Then suddenly, she felt that same suffocating presence behind her. She turned, and there he was again, standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on her as though she were the only person in the world. He walked into the kitchen slowly, every step deliberate, until he was just a few feet away. "Make me some juice," he said in broken Urdu, his voice low, almost playful. She obeyed, her hands trembling as she reached for the blender. She could feel his gaze burning into her back, following every movement, and her nerves began to fray. As she poured the juice into a glass, he spoke again. "I cannot control my eyes," he admitted openly, his accent thick. "But can you blame me? You are too beautiful. I have never seen anyone with your charm." Her heart leapt into her throat. She clenched the glass tightly, her mind racing. Why is he saying this? Why here? Why me? In that moment, her hand slipped. The juice spilled across the counter and onto his crisp shirt. Before she could apologize, a sharp voice cut through the room. His wife. She stormed into the kitchen, her eyes flashing with fury. In one swift movement, she raised her hand and struck Samina across the face so hard that she fell to the floor. The sting of the slap burned her cheek, but the humiliation burned deeper. The wife towered over her, shouting accusations in Arabic, her voice filled with rage. Samina didn't understand the words, but she didn't need to. The hatred in the woman's eyes said everything. For a terrifying moment, she thought she would be thrown out of the house immediately, her dreams collapsing in an instant. But then, the husband stepped forward. He caught his wife's arm gently, whispering something calming into her ear. His voice softened, coaxing her away. Reluctantly, she let him guide her out of the kitchen, her glare lingering on Samina until the last second. Samina remained on the floor, her cheek throbbing, her hands shaking. She realized then that the situation was spiraling beyond her control. His interest in her was no longer subtle, and his wife had already sensed it. The danger she feared was no longer distant. It was already at her door. That night, Samina could not sleep. She lay on her narrow bed in the small servant's room, staring at the ceiling, her cheek still burning from the slap. Shame and fear twisted inside her. She thought of her father, frail and sick, waiting for her support. She thought of her younger brother, holding on to his books with hope that one day his sister's sacrifice would bring him an education. She wanted to protect them, to build a future for them, but how could she, when her own future seemed to hang by a thread? She turned over, pulling the blanket tight, when a sudden knock shattered the silence. Her heart jumped. At this hour, who could it be? She froze, hoping whoever it was would leave. But the knock came again, harder this time. Then she heard his voice, deep and commanding, speaking in broken Urdu. "Come out. I want to talk to you. You have 5 minutes, or I will open the door myself." Her pulse raced. Every instinct told her not to go, to stay hidden. But something stronger pulled her to her feet. She opened the door cautiously and stepped out into the garden. He stood near the swing, smoke curling from the cigar in his hand. His tall frame and confident stance made him seem untouchable. He looked at her directly, his eyes softer than before. "I want to marry you," he said simply. The words struck her like thunder. She stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. Before she could speak, he continued, "I want you as my wife. Will you agree to marry me?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He drew in a breath, exhaling smoke as he spoke again. "2 of my wives betrayed me. I divorced them. I don't want liars. I don't want deceivers. I want honesty. You are different. You had every chance to take money from me, to sell your dignity. But you did not. That is why I respect you. That is why I love you." Samina's chest tightened. She whispered, "What if your wife discovers this?" He smiled faintly, dismissing her concern. "Do not worry about her. In 2 days, I will return. I will marry you, and you will have a palace of your own. Guards, servants, everything you deserve." He turned to leave, his steps long and confident, as if the matter was already settled. Samina remained by the swing, her mind reeling. For the first time in her life, wealth and escape from poverty seemed within reach. Her heart pounded with both excitement and fear. She could not tell her father yet, not until it was real. But in that moment she allowed herself to dream. Perhaps destiny was finally turning in her favor. The next morning, Samina awoke with a restless excitement in her chest. The man's words echoed in her mind like a song she could not silence. "I will marry you. You will have a palace of your own." She had fallen asleep, imagining her father's relief when he no longer had to worry about expenses, her younger brother's face lighting up with the promise of education and the possibility of living a life she had never dared to dream. For once, hope seemed real, tangible, close enough to touch. But hope can turn cruel. When she opened her eyes, she found something strange. The room was filled with people. Several maids stood in a circle, and in the center was the lady of the house, her face twisted with rage. Before Samina could rise, the woman lunged forward, grabbing her by the hair and yanking her upright. "How dare you!" the woman screamed in Arabic. Words Samina did not fully understand, but the venom in her voice needed no translation. She shoved her roughly toward the bed and pointed at a golden bracelet lying on the sheets. "Thief!" the translator shrieked, interpreting her mistress's fury. Samina's heart sank. No, this isn't mine. I haven't touched it, she cried, her voice breaking. But the accusations did not stop there. Another maid, trembling and tearful, stepped forward, an Indian girl who had only arrived days earlier. The lady declared that Samina had attacked this girl in an attempt to kill her. The poor servant stood silently, too frightened to deny or defend, her silence serving as damning proof. Samina's body went cold. Her mind screamed for logic, for fairness, but reality was merciless. The wife had discovered her husband's intentions and chosen revenge. In her eyes, Samina was not just a servant, she was a threat, an enemy, a rival to be destroyed. Before Samina could explain, before she could even breathe properly, the lady pulled her by the arm and dragged her through the halls of the mansion. She shoved her into the main lounge where she dialed the police with icy precision. Within minutes, Dubai authorities arrived. The accusation was clear: theft and attempted murder. Samina wept and pleaded as they handcuffed her. "Please, I am innocent. I have done nothing wrong." Her voice echoed in the marble halls, but the only response was the cold silence of betrayal. As she was forced into the police car, she looked back once at the mansion gates. The dreams she had built overnight of marriage, of wealth, of freedom from poverty, shattered like fragile glass. She had walked into that palace with hope. Now she was leaving it in chains. The cell door clanged shut behind her, its echo ringing in her ears like a cruel verdict. Samina sank to the cold floor, her hands trembling, her mind racing. Everything had collapsed in a single day. One moment she was dreaming of wealth and marriage, the next she was branded a thief and an attempted murderer. The betrayal cut deeper than the slap she had endured in the kitchen. She knew the truth. She was not being punished for stealing. She was being punished for existing in the path of a powerful woman's jealousy. Prison was a place of shadows and stares. The air was thick with despair, and the walls seemed to whisper the cries of those who had been broken before her. For Samina, the greatest danger did not come from the prisoners but from the guards. One in particular watched her constantly, his eyes crawling over her like poison. His gaze made her skin crawl, and though she tried to keep her distance, his presence lingered wherever she moved. One evening, as she sat quietly near the bars, he approached. His smirk carried both cruelty and arrogance. He leaned close, his breath foul, and whispered, "You can make this easier for yourself. Be kind to me, and I will make your life here easier. Refuse, and you will regret it." Her heart pounded, but her resolve hardened. She looked him in the eye and spat, "Stay away from me! If you try to touch me again, I will scream until the entire prison hears." For a moment, he seemed shocked by her defiance, but then his face twisted with rage. "You will regret this," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. The days that followed were tense. Every time he passed by, his eyes threatened her, promising revenge. Samina clung to thoughts of her father and brother, the only anchor keeping her sane. She longed to call them, to hear their voices, but feared breaking their hearts with the truth. When she finally gathered the courage to tell them, her father broke down in tears and her younger brother's voice trembled with helpless anger. They wanted to help, but what could they do from so far away? Then came the night when her resistance pushed the guard over the edge. He returned, his patience gone, his fury boiling. She stood firm, her jaw set, but he lunged toward her. In that desperate moment, she spat at him, once, twice, 3 times, her only weapon against his humiliation. His face flushed red with rage. "You dare humiliate me? You will pay for this," he roared. He stormed out, and within minutes she realized the depth of her peril. The keys rattled, the locks opened, and he dragged her out with brute force. Samina fought, begged, pleaded, but he did not stop. His voice was cold and triumphant as he pulled her toward another wing of the prison. "If you will not bow to me," he sneered, "then you will learn your place among others who will." Her cries echoed in the corridors, but no one came to help. The nightmare was only just beginning. The guard dragged Samina down the dim corridor, his grip like iron on her arm. Her pleas fell on deaf ears, echoing uselessly against the stone walls. She thought he would hurt her himself, but his cruelty went further. He unlocked a heavy door and shoved her forward with a sinister grin. Before she could catch her balance, she stumbled into a large cell. 12 men turned their heads toward her, their eyes narrowing in curiosity. The guard's voice rang out with mockery. "Here, my friends, I have brought you a gift. Enjoy yourselves tonight. Break her pride, yet make her crawl to me." His laughter echoed as he slammed the door behind him, leaving her trapped in the den of men who were said to be among the most dangerous in the prison. Samina's knees buckled. She clung to the bars, screaming desperately, "Please, don't do this. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me here." Her voice cracked with terror, but the guard was gone. She turned back, her wide eyes meeting the cold stares of the prisoners. Her heart pounded so violently she thought it might burst. The leader of the men rose slowly from a wooden bench, his steps measured, his presence commanding. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his expression unreadable. Samina squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the worst. She lifted her trembling hands in a plea. "Please, have mercy. I can't take any more." But instead of violence, a hand touched her head gently. Shocked, she opened her eyes. The leader's face was calm, his voice unexpectedly soft. "Do not be afraid," he said. "We are not like him. That guard is filth, but we are men of honor. No one will harm you here." Samina blinked, unable to believe what she was hearing. The other prisoners nodded, their gazes no longer threatening but protective. The leader continued, "To use a woman for pleasure is cowardice. We are not cowards. Tonight, you are not a prisoner. You are our sister." He guided her to sit among them, his tone steady and reassuring. "Be grateful you were brought here tonight," he whispered. "This is not a curse, it is a blessing. For tonight, we make our escape." Samina's breath caught. Escape? She stared at him in disbelief, and he explained in hushed tones. For weeks, they had been digging a tunnel beneath the floor. The guards' arrogance had blinded him to their plan. All they needed now was a distraction, and Samina's cries had already provided it. The leader smiled, his eyes burning with resolve. "And stay close to us. By dawn, you will be free, and one day soon you will see your family again." For the first time since her arrest, hope flickered in her chest. Surrounded by men who could have destroyed her but chose instead to protect her, she felt a strange, unexpected safety. Perhaps in this pit of despair, she had found brothers she never knew she needed. Samina sat pressed against the wall, her breath still uneven, as the leader laid out the details of their plan. The tunnel had been carved quietly for weeks, each man taking shifts to dig while others kept watch. Now, with the guard distracted by his own arrogance, the final stretch of their work was almost complete. All they needed was time. "You must play your part," the leader whispered. "Cry out. Scream as though you are being torn apart. He will believe his cruelty is working. Meanwhile, we will finish the tunnel." Samina's chest tightened. The thought of pretending to suffer felt humiliating, but she understood the necessity. She nodded. With trembling hands, she clutched the bars and began to scream, her voice echoing through the corridors. She shouted until her throat grew raw, begging for mercy, her cries so convincing that even she almost believed them. Moments later, she heard footsteps and cruel laughter. The guard appeared at the door, peering in with a twisted grin. "Good," he muttered, his eyes glinting with satisfaction. "Let her cries humble her. She deserves no better." His laughter lingered as he walked away, certain of his triumph. Behind her, the men worked faster, their movements precise and desperate. Dust rose from the ground as the tunnel widened, the faint smell of earth mixing with sweat and determination. The leader crouched beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Just a little longer," he murmured. "Hold on." Freedom is near hours passed like years, but at last the tunnel broke through. A faint draft of cool night air swept into the cell, carrying with it the promise of salvation. One by one, the men slipped into the narrow passage, their bodies disappearing into the earth. When it was Samina's turn, her heart pounded wildly. Crawling through the tunnel, her palms scraped and her knees ached, but she pressed forward, driven by the memory of her father's frail figure and her brother's eager smile. When she emerged into the open desert night, the stars above looked brighter than she had ever seen. She took in a deep breath, the taste of freedom sharp and overwhelming. The men stood around her, their faces lit with both exhaustion and triumph. The leader looked at her and said, "From this moment, you are no longer a prisoner. You are free, and so are we." In the days that followed, justice began to unfold. News reached her that the jealous wife who had framed her was finally exposed and sent behind bars herself. The guard who had abused his power was stripped of his position and punished for his crimes. The tables had turned, and those who once conspired against her now bore the weight of their own cruelty. Samina lifted her head high for the first time in months. She had walked through betrayal, humiliation, and terror, but she had come out stronger. Freedom was hers, and with it, the promise of a new life. Freedom tasted sweeter than she had ever imagined. After months of humiliation and fear, Samina found herself breathing clean air, walking under the open sky, and holding her head high again. The memory of the tunnel, the strength of the men who had treated her like a sister, and the night of their escape replayed in her mind like a sacred story. She knew she would never forget it. Her first act was to reach out to the two people whose voices had kept her alive through despair, her father and younger brother. With trembling hands, she called them, and when they heard her voice, both wept openly. She assured them she was safe, not only safe, but moving toward a future they had never dared to dream. Soon, she promised, I will bring you here. We will no longer live in fear or hunger. Our lives will change. Her brother's excitement filled her ears, and her father's prayers flowed over her like blessings. Life shifted quickly after that. Through the help of those who respected her courage and resilience, she was introduced to a man of high standing, an Arab sheikh known not for his wealth alone but for his sense of honor. Unlike others who had tried to buy her dignity, he valued her honesty above all. When he asked her to become his wife, it was not with threats or bribes, but with respect. For the first time in her life, Samina felt the offer of marriage not as a trap, but as a shelter. Their union brought stability she had once thought impossible. With her new position, she ensured her younger brother's education and her father's care. The small house in Pakistan that had been filled with struggle now carried laughter again, their hardships replaced by gratitude. Samina herself was treated with dignity, living in a home where she was no longer a servant, but a partner. Yet, despite her new life, she never forgot the 12 men in the prison who had shielded her when she was most vulnerable. They had the power to harm her, but chose instead to protect her, proving that true strength lies in restraint and honor. In her prayers, she always remembered them, asking for their freedom, peace, and redemption. Looking back, she realized her journey was not just about survival. It was about discovering who she truly was. Poverty had not broken her. Betrayal had not destroyed her. Even prison had not erased her dignity. Through it all, she had held on to her integrity. And in the end, it was that integrity which saved her. As she sat one evening beneath the quiet desert sky, she whispered to herself, "Real wealth is not gold or palaces. Real wealth is dignity, and those rare souls who protect it."